here we are going to look at an example of video that is very shaky. It's an airplane flying over my head, and I just barely had the time to start rolling the camera, and so it's very shaky. And in fact, if we just play it, we can see. Let's try to track it. There it is back. Okay, so this is really bad material, bad video, but let's say this is the only one we have and the only one we're gonna want to work with. So how can we work with that to make it somewhat more usable? I wanted to show a couple of things I would typically try at that point. So first of all, I'm watching this in the QuickTime player, and one of the things I like about it is that I have the pro version for like $29. You can do the export to image sequence, so that's certainly one thing that I would do, or convert it to AVI without compression or something like that. So you keep the original size. You don't want to have it go smaller or blurrier or anything like that. So first thing to do is keep it at the original size and go and export. You see I have the French version of Windows 8 here, and I'm going to do an exporting here of the image sequence. So at this point, let's see if I have working with video. Let's make a folder shaky shaky. I know, shaky 1. There you go. We'll probably have a couple of experiments with shaky video. So let's put it there, and the format will be a sequence of images, so image sequence, there it is, and the options, you could go with TIFF, that works pretty well. There's a couple of other formats. Targa is the native format for dog waffle, but TIFF works pretty well also for importing an image sequence pretty fast. Let's keep it at 30 frames a second, and there are some other options here. Bit depth, make sure it's not on one of those grayscales at just 4 levels of shades. Keep it at millions of colors. That's ultimately what we prefer, and you can actually use the compressed format as far as I know. So pack bits is an option, and then let's go do that. Let's go and export the image sequence. So now each frame of that video clip is being saved by itself as a single individual TIFF file. That has a couple of advantages. One is if you're loading this and it's a big video, too big to fit in memory, now you have the granularity to perhaps load only a portion of it. Right? Initially, if you have just one file, that one video file, it's too big perhaps to fit in memory if you have an application, a software that loads the whole thing into RAM. And so here's let's see, let's go and load this image sequence into the into Howler, and let's go to animation. Let's see, load sequence, and I think I have that on my D drive, and that would be working with video. Oh wait, daily dose, there you go, and under that I have working with video. There it is, and shaky 1, right? So here are the TIFF images. I'm going to load just a few first, just to see what they look like. Does it load fine and fast? Yep, there they are. I can hold the control and the shift key down, and then right drag to zoom in and out. Alright, so here is indeed the first frame, and we can scrub through that, and we see how we already lose the airplane on the initial sequence as it is flying over my head. So that confirming that the image sequence looks usable, I'm going to now load a longer part of it. We can probably skip a few of the frames initially, since we know that's not going to be usable. Let's go from here on down and load a bunch. Maybe we can try to load them all. Let's see what that looks like, and if it fails, it fails, and if it works, it works. Alright, so here's the entire image sequence, or the remainder of the image sequence being loaded, and probably we'll realize that there are a couple of frames that we can dismiss anyway, so we'll delete some of those, and then the focus will shift on how do we stabilize all that, how do we make kind of a possible use of this. Let's first show 100% or squeeze it in here, right? Fit the image to the window. That way we're not zoomed in too much, because it is a high definition video. It's at 1080p. We have some of the information not showing if it's set to zoom at 100%, showing it zoomed in one for one. Then part of it is possibly off the limit of the window, because I have a screen resolution that is lower than the image resolution. I mean, the image is 1920 by 1080. That's a little bit higher than my screen resolution. So let's go and squeeze it in, and let's see what else we can work with here. There's a number of frames from about here to the end that have no airplane, so no need to keep that. I think right about here we will want to drop that one. So let's set this one as the in marker, go to the last one, set it as the out marker, and we can scrub through here and see now that we have a portion of that, those frames here that are selected. We can delete that block. Delete these frames and move on to the next part, which is the beginning part, where we also have to wait a little bit until we see. Let's make sure we squeeze all the, yep, we are zoomed in. So here's where the airplane enters the scene, and it is all over the map. Look at how quickly it moves. So that is, and it also changes size, so that will make it a bit more challenging, and it turns around. In terms of putting a motion tracker on that, it's not a one-click proposition. There's going to be a little bit of preparation work, and that's really what I want to discuss here, is how can you perhaps prepare it manually for a bit more stability. How can you if you don't have the motion tracker, or if you don't want to use it, if you can't use it because it's moving too much, what can you do to manually stabilize it? Right. So what I'll do is I'll get rid of a few more frames here at the beginning. I think about here is where it becomes interesting. Let's make this the out marker. Let's go to the first frame, make that place the in marker here, and right click and delete this block now. So again, we have a few blocks removed, and we are left now with a total of 132 frames where we actually do see the airplane all across it here. Now this frame, there's one or two we could still delete. That last one here, let's delete this one. That's delete the current frame. One more. Okay, we'll stay all the way through here. And so you can scrub through that. You can use the left and right arrow keys as well if you like to navigate through that. Let's get the keyboard focus. You can paint on that. Okay, that's not gonna go right now. Let's not focus on that. Let's go and focus on stabilizing. So one thing, of course, improving our workflow now, we want to store this. One thing I would do, actually save it. This is a clip you're going to work with, so let's save it to file, at least as a quick DWA file. But being lazy as I am, I'm just going to store it. That also goes to disk, so worst case scenario, if the computer runs out of power or if it crashes or something, I can still find it in the temp folder where everything is stored. But I'll just do that, so I have a quick placeholder of my video that I can go back to quite easily simply by clicking it right there. Boom, that will restore the video in case I'm making any changes that I regret, such as painting here, right? And paint over that so much that I cannot restore it. And also I'll just click on that, and that will restore the entire video in a heartbeat. So now let's focus on this, talking about heartbeat, about this heartbeat of this video, the shaky video. What I'd like to do is find a couple of ways to stabilize it. And one of the ways to stabilize it really is to just manually shift it. Shift the focus of the video to a different place. And so one thing I'll do is give it first of all some reference. If you scroll down on your sidebar, which might be on the right side or on the left side, that's sidebar has some reference ruler as a drawing grid, visible grid. You can turn that one on. You will probably want to increase the distance between the different pieces here. Vertical and horizontal, and understand also that you may not see the entire grid depending on how much you zoomed in or zoomed out. So if you zoom in or zoom out, you'll see a little bit of some missing lines because it's just dropping them if it's not falling on the grid. That's okay. What we'll probably do is we won't use this. There's too many lines of those. We just need a few. So let's go and disable the visible grid and instead go to the artist guides. So the artist guides, you could even reduce it to or increase it to more, but I think 2 by 2 is just fine. Artist guides will give you a bit of a sense of reference lines that you would perhaps want to center on. So you see now as you scroll through the video here, the artist lines are still in the middle. The airplane is all over the map though, and if you zoom back to show everything, where is it? Over here, fit the image. There you go. Now you see the entire image, and the challenge now is really to make the airplane stay right here in the middle. Then that will be much more stable. Now you don't necessarily have the time to do that on every frame, but it's an idea. It's something you could possibly do. And one way to do that now is to simply go to filter and transform and shift. Right now that's going to be tedious, but I want to show you the concept first. Okay, so you do this, and then you say, okay, let's drag it and drag it some more until you have it right here in the center of your crossed lines here, the artist guides. All right, okay. Now you could animate that, but that same shift is not the one you need for each of the frames, not the same amount of shift. Each frame has a different amount of shift needed. So what you see here, you go back to filter on the next frame, right, and shift, and again move it. Well, that one was close, so that one didn't need much more. But then you go to the next frame and you shift again. Where's the transform shift? And you can see that that's going to work, but it's not going to be a very fast way to do it. I have just 3 here now, and they're all nicely centered, but it's not a very ideal situation because it will take a long time to do the entire sequence. So another way to do that now is through the timeline, and with the timeline you could actually select the shift key here. Let's go to the transport, I think 3 down. There it is. There's a shift, and with the shift filter you can transform that. You can scrub through that, perhaps go to the first one and kind of place it roughly in the middle and keyframe that, right? And then you go somewhere around here and you place this in the middle here and keyframe that. And now as you scrub through that, you can see that it's a little bit closer. Actually not here in this preview yet. In here, this is where you want to look, in this preview, not in the main view. Unfortunately we don't have the this would be nice to have it a little bit bigger, but it's going to be good enough as a first pass. You can always do this once or twice to eventually get it really in the middle. So let's go and center this one as well. Here we need to center it some more over here, and then here we need to bring it back down a little bit, and then here it's already turning over our heads, and bring it around here, and then finally at the very last we are almost out of the scene, but let's keep it in there because we kind of ignore the background sky and the edge of it, and we simply try to keep the airplane in the middle or close enough. Now it's still shaky, it's still moving around all over the map here, but actually not so much all over. And we can still fine-tune that even some more. Right here it's in the center, here it moves, drops down. Well then let's bring it back in and keyframe that some more. In fact, you can make this window bigger, so you get much more granularity. You can also zoom into it here if you need some extra detail. You can see every single frame eventually. So with that, you can certainly go and place this in a much more favorable situation here, where you can see the airplane move still and jitter a little bit, but not as much as it did before. Right, so you can, there for instance, it's again in the middle, and let's go here. You can see now, look at that, it's starting to look pretty stable here. We're correcting It's erratic movement, ever so slightly, centering it. And let's see if we can go a little bit more towards the center part of the video there. Maybe we can bring it down and bring it here. And then here it's a little bit up too high. Let's bring it into the center again. Okay, and what else? Over here, we can bring it down here. Okay, so that didn't hurt too much. That didn't take too much time. We have about 20 or so keyframes. Let's go zoom down out a little bit to see the entire sequence. There you go. And so now this sequence, yeah, you see each of the keyframes, and you know, you can do a linear interpolation if you want to uncheck this, or you can you can have it spline interpolated and then apply it. And so now this is applying a corrective measure, if you want, a corrective transformation. And let's go and dismiss that and store that. This is a very valuable piece of animation that we have spent some time on, so let's go store that. And we have now a new sequence. We can disable the artist guide if we don't think we need that anymore. Let's wait for the store to be completed. Not sure why it needs so much time this time. Maybe the hard drive. Oh, there it is. Okay, let me just. I don't have a very fast spinning hard drive. So disable the artist guide and let's see what we've got. Now you see the airplane much more in the center. Now it's still shaky and moving around a lot, right? But it's, at least we don't have to like look all over to the left and the right and everything like that. It's much more in the center. And so that's a starting point that we can do perhaps some more. Like for instance, we could now at this point try to use the motion tracker if it is, you know, within range of what the tracking distance is. It might actually be able to lock on it. There are still 1 or 2 frames where, okay, this one here is actually cutting the wings off. So there's a few frames we might want to dismiss, maybe just the 1 frame. This one here, we could delete this one and say, okay, so you're gone, you don't want to be part, you don't want to be playing, well, let's take you out. There you go. One more there, that's an incomplete airplane. Let's dismiss that one. And so that one that way we actually cut a portion of the airplane, of the frame sequence, but that's okay because we don't need them all. Most of them are not really usable. Anyway, this one is kind of blurry at the end. Let's dismiss this one. 2 or 3 of those. It's moving too fast. There you go, there it's crisp again. So, you know, let's gradually focus on what's really going to be usable. Let's delete this 1 or 2 and 1 more. Okay, so we have now a sequence that I like better and that perhaps we can use. Now we have 118 frames. Let's go and store that to disk. Alright, so with that, another thing we can do perhaps is to crop it, because, you know, we have it now kind of centered, but there's a lot of garbage around it, a lot of material around it that we are certainly not going to want to use or keep. There is no point in keeping all this blue sky around it if we are really trying to focus on this airplane. And what I would suggest perhaps we do is we use the crop tool. You know, now that the airplane is pretty much somewhat safely in the center, and we could bring it even more so with the timeline once more, what you could do is simply go to the image and crop tool, and it will resize it so you have the full visibility on that. But what you can do is you can grab a portion of that. You can say, okay, it's got to be in here, right? Let's see if we can verify that the airplane doesn't move out. It still moves, right? But let's make sure it stays inside of this crop area. And if that's the case, let's go right click here and crop. Now you have to be careful. This video that you now have created is smaller in dimension, and most importantly, it may also be odd in dimensions. If you check the dimensions under the image info, you will see that it could potentially, in my case it did not, 972 by 600. That's a very random pick, lucky pick, but sometimes you'll get some odd numbers there. I was lucky here to get just even numbers. And I'm going to store that one. That one's less memory intensive, should store quite a bit faster. and there it is. And so the next thing perhaps I want to do is the same thing again, right? I can go to the timeline again and go back to that filter, 1, 2, 3, and shift it, and really do some more fine-tuning of that position here, and say, okay, let's grab it and bring it down to the middle. Let's go around here and just find a few more to be applying a little bit of a corrective measure here. Bring it to the center and that sort of thing, right? So we have just another pass at that to see if we can stabilize it some more. Again, at this point still manually, because the movement is still very erratic and very fast. Fairly big increments in change in position, right? So at this point though, we're getting to a point where this is going to be more and more stable. Apply that, and so we now have a sequence where it's still jittery. It moves a lot still, but it's much more contained in the middle. I mean, you can see, like, if I place my cursor over it here, it's like almost very close to that cursor, right? And so that's a good starting point for the next phase, I would think, which is to apply the motion prediction module, or to do some sort of an interpolation to smooth it, or perhaps just to stabilize. So let's first store this one more time. There it is. And so now what I'll do is go to the filter and you look for the animated stabilizer. There it is, stabilize. Now when I use a stabilizer, I better be having something that can be stabilized. You're going to place a motion tracker on it, right? So that's what the stabilizer uses. You'll see it in the upper left corner initially, but then you click on select track point and you place it somewhere on a sharp edge, like the tip of the airplane here. See if it can actually place it right there, and perhaps give it a bit more dimension, and also increase the distance of like where to search for it as it goes from one plane to the next plane, right? Well, the thing is, it's still probably moving too fast. Let's try it. We are in dry run mode. Let's go try that. And here it's got it. Oh, now it's lost it already. So you see, it's just too noisy, too erratic. This one is not a good starting point yet. So what we'll do is we'll have to wait for that to complete. Maybe sometimes it will lock back on it and find it accidentally. That's a possibility. But most of the time, probably it's still too much movement. You can see also it's blurry at times and then crisp. Sometimes you see those gun what are those on the side here, the rockets or the guns. There is some detail that would be great to lock on as you do your tracking, but it's also changing in brightness. Sometimes you saw it get very bright as it was reflecting the sunlight. And so all in all, it's just not a good, easy picture to stabilize on in an automatic fashion. So I think we are probably better off doing this manually still for a little while. And one thing we might want to do is to actually pick this up now as a custom brush, and then use the brush keyframer to reposition it. Let me explain. Let me do this. I'm going to grab the entire image sequence. So I'm going to go to the first image, and you know what? Maybe we don't need to have have it on the entire size though. Let's go do the following. I'm going to draw an oval. Let's draw the oval, but the selection, here it is, the ellipse to alpha, right? And I'm going to go somewhere in the middle. Let's temporarily enable the artist guide again. Let's go in the middle and draw this oval around this big. There, why not about like this? And if you want to see it better, you can go to the selection and enable the overlay. So now you see the portion of our selection. What we want to do is see, is our airplane always inside of that? Is there any place where it's outside? No, it's still inside. It doesn't seem to move out of that area. So that's good. So what we can do is we can pick this area up as a custom brush, and we know we will have the airplane in it. All right. So in fact, we can also give it a little bit of a soft edge if we want to blur that transition from where it is selected towards where it is not selected. So let's go to the Gaussian blur on that selection menu, and you can see now we can do a little bit of a soft transition. Don't give it too much, but just about like this much, so we have a nice little soft transition on that selection. Let me zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. So outside here it's not selected, on the inside it's fully selected, and then we now have introduced not a crisp transition, but so not a sudden jump, but a soft transition where it's gradually losing that selection from the inside to the going to the outside. And if you ever wonder, you can also store this selection, store alpha, and you can see indeed it is a soft edge on that transition. So now what we'll do is we'll pick this up as a custom brush, but not just on this one image. I mean, if you do that here from the brush and say use the selected as brush, use selected as brush means this entire selection will be picked up as a brush. Let's see what that looks like. If I do that, it now has cleared the selection, but it also has picked up the image inside that selection. If I click the preview, you can see it barely. Let me make it a bit more opaque, fully opaque. There you go. So now you can see, especially if I invert, or if I switch to the swap buffer, you can see that I have this now in my brush and I can paint that, but it's this one image. I didn't get the entire animation. Still, you could use that to have a whole army of airplanes all flying at the same time here, right? Just stamp them down. But what I really want to do though is switch back to the video, is I want to pick this up as a custom brush, not just on this one frame, but also on the next one and the next one and the next one. What do we call that? We call that a custom animated brush, or an anim brush for short. So we have a number of items here under the brush, animated brush, and you could save a brush and you could create it in a couple of ways. Well, one way to pick it up is through the custom brush pickup tool right here, custom brush selector tool, right? That is kind of similar to the one here, except that it's not just looking for the selection. It's going to ask you to indicate what it is you want to select. Well, let's bring back that selection. First of all, let's undo what we did, go back in time until we are back to the place where the selection was still there, if we can get to that. There it is. And by the way, if you did too many changes, we have this stored alpha. We can just replace that as well. That will bring it back there too. Let me turn the preview off so we don't see it. Now what I'm going to do is simply use that custom brush selection tool right there, and you have the marquee selector to indicate what part you want to select. You can zoom in a little bit. Oh, there is a little bit of a glitch at the top. Let's make sure we don't pick that one up. All we want to do really is from about here down here. So I'm going to go select, click and drag. Make sure you're at the beginning of the frame sequence, because you're going to want to have it from here all the way to the end picked up as a custom brush. So here we go. Click and drag, and before you let go, I'm still selecting exactly what part I want here. Before you let go of the mouse button, hold the Alt key, press and hold the Alt key, and that way, instead of picking up just this one image, it's picking up every remaining image from here to the end. So since we were at the beginning, it's picking up the entire image sequence one by one. And so now we're loading this into a custom brush, and the first thing I'll do is I go to the brush menu and store to manage it. Store and manage a copy. You could also you could also save it, but this would save just the current frame. If you want to save the animated brush, you'll do that right here. From the animated brush, it will save the entire sequence as a and B animated brush file. So let's go to store and manage copy. That way you'll see right here that you have the brush with transparency all around it. That was the part that was not selected. On the inside, the alpha channel has the selection and keeps it opaque. But most importantly, if you click at show film strip, you see that there is more than one image in it. There's one here, there's one here, there's a whole strip, a film strip. The entire sequence was picked up into the brush. Yes, this is a custom animated brush. That's what we call it, an animated brush, because we now have all these frames inside the brush. And yes, that means we can actually paint with it. Let's go and, for instance, clear the selection. Let's go selection, clear alpha, and enable the preview. Click preview so we see this. Let's go and clear the entire video. Just in case I forgot, before I do that, I'm going to store the animation, store to disk. And then at that point, it's safe to clear the video, so I could go, for instance, I suppose probably right click, and these are the editing tools. Maybe I need to go to animation clear there. You don't want to free it, you want to keep it, but you want to clear it to the background color, which is right now white. That's the secondary color. So let's go clear and clear all frames. There you go. So now we have this brush, and what we can do is paint with it. For instance, if you reduce the step distance a little bit here and make it very small, just 2 units or 3 units, as you're dragging here and painting, you can see that it's actually cycling through the airplane. The video that you have in your brush now is being stamped down as you're painting with it. Alright, so that's one thing that we now have, and as a result of that, we can now use that to actually paint a more stable version of this sequence with the brush keyframer. Let me explain. I'm going to clear this. So we now have an empty sequence of exactly the same number of frames that we had initially and that we have picked up into the brush. And now I'm going to do the following. I'm going to go to the animation menu and select the brush keyframer. Right? And in the brush keyframer, what you do, you have sort of a preview. This one I love because you can scale it, you can make it bigger. Hopefully someday we'll also have that in the filter timeline editor, but or in the animated brush timeline editor. But this one here is the brush keyframer, and as you see, it places the current brush in the center by default. And you can scrub through the animation while it actually scrubs through the brush at the same time. There is no animation behind it yet. In fact, if you move the brush to the side, you can see that there's nothing animated. It's this plain white sequence. But this one you can actually show. You can center it, or you can place it roughly where you think you need it. You can also make it smaller or bigger. You can change the size of it here. And you could do all sorts of other things, like rotate it. You can do some corrective measurements on that. Change the opacity to hide it. Let's say set it to the first keyframe here and say, okay, it's going to need to be around here. Right now, I suppose you could try that, but this artist preview is not showing the preview in this floating window. It's showing it in the back there, unfortunately. So we're going to have to use our imagination as to where the center is. But that's good enough for a first pass, don't you think? Look at that. I can keyframe that, and there's actually a shortcut. You can hit K for keyframe, and you now have a little red marker here, and then you go to the very end and keyframe that one here, and oops, we get a little error message here. So this one, I don't know why we have this last frame. Or maybe we come back to the very first frame of the brush. That's probably what it is. So that's okay. We can go to the one just before that and center that around here and keyframe that. And so now we have a keyframe there, and maybe put the last one there too, and make sure it is back in about the center here. So we can set keyframes wherever we think it's a good place to do so. Don't waste your time doing that for every frame necessarily, but see if you can put them here, and perhaps another one here, perhaps go in the middle. I like to do this gradually, not from left to right, but kind of in the middle, halfway, and see if I want that one. Yep. And then perhaps somewhere around here. There, let's move this one kind of in the middle, and then do another one around here where it moves up. Let's bring it back down. That's even more. Something like this. So hit the keyframe, the K, or click over here every time that you want to mark another keyframe. And so you can basically create some corrective measures for any of these frames and say, okay, record a slightly different transformation here, and keyframe again. And so every time that I say keyframe, I'm actually hitting my keyboard key here, K for keyframe. As you can see, there's a tooltip here that says set the keyframe, keyboard K, or enter. You can even hit the enter key to do that. Let's try that. So here, for instance, when I want this one, bring it down, hit enter, and you now have another one. So you see all these little red tick marks, those are keyframes, right? So I'm gonna go one more here for this one and hit enter. And so now we have a number of keyframes, perhaps a few more needed over here, because there it seems to be losing it also. Let's go over there and there. Now what I've just done here is kind of a very tedious manual operation. And in fact, what would probably be better is if there were an automatic way, and there is a tracker, there is a track brush, where you can actually, if you have some information in the background, which I didn't in this case, this was plain white, but if you had some information in the background, you could set the airplane on one and the other place and then sort of track that brush, have the brush track the image underneath it. So there's a motion tracker for that as well, but that's not exactly what we need here. Here we need to simply stabilize it by visually giving it some corrective adjustment to the positions. And you eventually will do that probably for about 20 or 30 places, different positions along the animation, to the point where it's just adding to the stability, where it's going to be a little bit more stable. Every time that you do this, perhaps a little bit more here, keyframe it, perhaps a little bit more over here, and keyframe it. Right. So now we have that. Let's go render it. Click render, and it's now repositioning the frame, the brush all across it. And so as a result of that, if you close this, you now have, if you disable the preview, you now have a video that is a little bit more stable. It's still jittery, it still moves a lot, right? But not in the sense of the distance. It's now in a much smaller, more contained area. And it just gets gradually more and more something that you could possibly actually use for the automatic motion stabilization. And now here's actually one where perhaps it even makes sense to split it into two parts, because the video is initially small, and then the airplane, it gets bigger. The last one here is small again. Let's dismiss this one. So we now have a sequence like this where here the airplane is pretty big because it came close to, right over our head, and I turned the camera, but before that it's a little bit farther away. And so you could perhaps split it into two areas so that it's a little bit easier for the automatic motion tracker to really stabilize it. You can say from here to here it's about the same size, and then gradually here it's a bigger dimension. We might want to split it. So first of all, let's store this one, and that will be our working set now. The brush, I might still want to hang on to that. Let's minimize it though. So here's our stored copy. Here's an older one that we probably don't need anymore. And so what I'll do is I'll split it into two parts. One thing I'll do is I'll find a place in the first section, somewhere around there, where I say, okay, up to here or up to here, somewhere around here. So the remaining part I want to delete. Let's go make the in marker right there. Let's go to the end, make the out marker right there. And you can see here now the whole thing is selected in blue. Let's right click and delete that block. Again, same thing, right? So we now have just the first part, and we can see the frame count is from 0 to 50. So we have a total of 51 frames. No, excuse me, 50 frames. The last frame is number 49. And we keep that in mind because if we restore the original and we want to go from this frame to the end, or from the next frame to the end, we know it's going to be frame number 51. Right, so if we have this one right now here, the first 50 frames, let's go store that, and that will be a good set to work with. And then independently from that, this is the first 50 right here. And then we restore this one, which has the entire sequence, and that one still has 117 frames, but we can go to frame number 50 right there and say, let's delete that one and the ones before. So frame number 49 rather, actually 49 out of 50, right? The first one to the last one was 49, 0 to 49. And so what you want to do is you want to go to that last one and then go to the first one, and we have this range, and you can delete that. So now we have the second block. left. That's the second block from frame, which is now 0 to 67, a total of 67, 0 to 66, meaning a total of 67 frames. And so that one we also want to store. That way we have actually both parts that are contiguous. We have the first sequence here, and we have the second sequence here. Right, so the first one, let's go work with that one. That one has 50 frames. And the second one, if we restore that, that one has 67. Okay, so later we can stitch them back together. This one here, though, we will now focus on to see if we can do a motion stabilization with the tracker. It's still very jittery, though. It's still moving quite a bit, but you never know. This might be good enough to fix it. And if not, you'll still need to manually fix it. We've seen how to do that with the shift filter or in the timeline. In fact, do I want to do that? No. I think it's time to give the automatic motion tracker a chance, because as we go from one frame to another here, it's clearly moving, but not too much anymore. I think we did a good job here on the prep work. So let's go now and play with that. See if we can actually go to the motion trackers under the animated category here and use, now you could do two things, right? Maybe you really want this sequence, but just slow it down a little bit. You could use the motion prediction module to stabilize it or to slow it down. But that's not what we are about here. What we want to do is just stabilize it without introducing more frames. We don't want to slow it down. We don't want more frames in this sequence. But what we do want is to stabilize it and set the tracking perhaps on this corner. Let's see, what else could we possibly want there? Maximum size, maximum distance. On the quality, the fudge factor, I think if we bring this one up higher, it will think about it a little bit longer. It will take more time, but hopefully be able to track it somewhat longer. We might want to remove the motion, or we might want to be happy just smoothing it. Okay, it's not always necessary to totally remove it. So if we do that, smoothing, that might be a little bit better, because it's difficult sometimes when it's moving too much to really stabilize it. Let's try this though. Let's try remove. And also, what do we do with the border handling? This one is kind of important because sometimes you want to do a stabilization, but only for a reason like this. You want to temporarily stabilize it, right? You want to stabilize it, do something like paint over it, maybe add some smoke trail or an explosion or a missile shot or something, and then destabilize it again, bring it back to the original movement to make it look like you actually were, it was shaky really all the time. So this stabilizing thing is not something you necessarily need to keep with it. You may want to have that just temporarily, so it makes your job easier for the post work as you're painting over it, right? And then you want to restore the movement. You can actually do that in Howler. It's a little known fact, but you can either say you want to repeat the movement so that the borders, so that you can then restore it. This is the correct mode if you would like to restore the camera motion later, right? This is repeating the edges. There is another one though, that's reconstructing it based on the past movements. It might see what material exists beyond the edge of the current frame, and it might be able to reconstruct a continuation of that. That depends a bit on the quality of the stabilization that it can achieve. All right, but in this case, let's keep it repeat mode and see where we go with that. All right, does it actually find the airplane? It looks like so far so good. It looks like we are able to track this. Look at that. It seems to be right on it for most frames. Up there it lost it. All right, so we will probably want to stabilize that a little bit differently, and that could be an indication of where we need to perhaps pick a different place, a different part of the airplane for the tracker. You can see here it's getting bigger also, so clearly it's going to lose it at some point. But let's see if we don't do a dry run, uncheck this, and actually do go. Now, see, let it go through the entire sequence, and at least part of the video will now be stabilized up to the point where it loses the tracking. So now, of course, if we don't have the entire sequence properly stabilized. What that means is that the part here is probably going to be shifted off and perhaps even off screen. You got to be careful with that, because if it's tracking an area all the way on the right side, it's going to try to re-center on that. So here, this one is good. The very first couple of frames are really nice, but then towards the end, it's shifted away. But look at that. This one's really amazing. So what I'll do is I'm going to go back to the filter and undo that. So there is an animated, let's go back to stabilize, and there's actually, you can go back to that and say restore motion, right? There's an option here, RT, which is to retime the camera data by a certain factor. That's if you did something like right click and do the time stretch, or you change the number of frames there. Then the positional changes, this camera data corrective information, needs to be retimed as well. And then here is the restore motion if you say, okay, I want to actually undo what I just did. So this camera motion is going to go back to where it was before it tried to stabilize it. Alright, so this time what we'll do is we'll say, well, maybe this one needs to be also split into two parts. Maybe there's just too much change in the size still, and we really want to focus on a portion where the video is still relatively the same size. Alright, how far do we go? Perhaps up to about here. Alright, so I'm going to split it here again, and this time actually just for sake of sanity and brevity here, I'm going to just select the second half, right click and delete that block. Alright, so we now have a short sequence, but it's one that we can use just for the purpose of demonstration, right? So what I'll do is I'll have these 26 frames. Let's go and store those, and that's our working set right now here. So here is where we go. We'll go to the stabilize function that's under animated stabilize, and we will need to make a dry run first, and then go to select the track point. This time I'll take the end tip of the wing in the back there where the engine exhaust is, and let's go make sure it's the maximum size, maximum search distance, maybe even increase the fudge factor a little bit more. Let's give it 2000 and let it rip. Let's see what it can do here. So far so good. It's blurry at times, but it still likes it. It still keeps tracking it, finding it. Every frame so far so good, I think. Oh, no, there it lost another one here. So, yeah, well, we'll need to try, but it's only the last 4 frames, so that's not too bad. Let's try another tracking point. Let's try the tip in the front. Maybe that one will be easier to find. Let's go with that. Nope, that one was not easier to find. So that's where it goes. Sometimes you try and it's a hit and miss thing, right? So let's see if we can find, let's wait for that one. Let's go back down on the fudge factor to about 1000. Oops, not 10,000, 1000. Let's set the track point to the left part here, the left side of the wing. Alright, and let's go with that. No, not bad, not good either. So I think the patterns we had here earlier were a little bit better. When we look at the central behind the main wing before the back wings, if we center on that, perhaps that will be the easiest one to find a lock. Another thing you can do, by the way, also is to try the MMX optimized search. That usually won't work too well with very fuzzy or changing imagery, but it can at times, or it certainly is perhaps a faster way to see where you want to be with regard to the tracking point. So let's set the tracking point right here, and let's try MMX optimized and go. No, that went all over the place too. So let's not do the MMX optimized, but this one. So this one certainly works okay so far. Maybe we'll just go with that. Okay. So this one, if we lose it at the very end, yeah, they went blurry and it lost tracking at that point. But I think it's only the last 4 or 5 frames. Let's do a last one. Let's do a dry run, but let's increase this to 4000. Maybe that will help it. I don't know how high we can or should go with that, but this is somewhat exponential, so be careful. Let's go and let it rip there now through the entire sequence and see if we can stabilize on that. I'm just going to have to wait for that to finish, and then at that point we'll have a sequence that yep, just the last 2 frames or so were off, right? If we now scrub through that, there, the last 1, 2, 3, 4 are still shaky, but this part here is very nicely stabilized. Look at that. You can scrub through that in the airplane. It's just in the middle. Enable the artist guides again, and you can see where it's just staying on it. Just like these parts here are a little bit off. Now these are only a few frames. Those are actually easy enough to perhaps bring back manually, right? Now here's one thing I want to show you for that also. You can use the artist guide, and you can zoom in here, and that's with the right click and the control shift, or you can use the magnifying glass here. So you can use that to position the next frame relative to your grid from the artist guide, right? So just remember, have a visual of what it is you're looking at, and then as you go to the next frame, see if you need to shift it around a little bit. Well, and that's of course something where it's going to be tediously done again with that shift function here, right? So you can shift it, and well, here's moving it too fast, and you'll have to remember where did you have it. So that's where, okay, it's possible, but it's not ideal. One thing that may work better is if you actually still have an imprint of the prior frame, if you can still see the older image from the prior frame, and that perhaps even without the artist guide. And that you can do too. This is what we call the onion skin, or the light table. If you enable the light table, it's actually showing you the next frame or the prior frame or both, and then even the one beyond that. So if there is much movement, you can see kind of ghost images of 1 or 2 frames ahead and 2 frames behind, right? So the one that's the most opaque is where the current image is, but then the next one, you can see here there's one appearing and another one over here as well. So that gives you kind of an idea of where the next one is heading. The thing is though, you still need a way to shift it around, to move it. And that will either require that you use the filter, the transform, right, and shift it. But the beauty of it is now you can actually do that. You can grab the shift and you can see where you want to align it against the old image, right? If that is the old place, you have to determine which one is this. Is it this one here, or is it this one here, right? But at least you can really nicely adjust it to reposition it. So what I would do is, first of all, enable the artist guide and determine therefore which one it is. It's probably this one here. Disable the light table to see where it was when it was stabilized. You see that right there. And then when the moment it goes off right there from this frame to that one, that's where you say, okay, so that's the good one. That's where you want to stay on. When you go to the next frame, you see it's a jump over there. So now you enable the light table, and you know, okay, so that's the one where it used to be. That's where it's going to go on the next frame, right? If you scrub ahead, you can see, oh yeah, look at that. It's still moving in that direction here. But this here is where it's at right now in this frame number 18. Let's go to the next frame, number 19. It needs to move back up here. So let's go to filter and transform and shift. And shift is not the only way to do that, by the way, but you can certainly do so. Bring it right there. And okay that. Then go to the next frame. That's now number 20. And it's showing the most opaque over here. No problem. Let's go here and shift and transform that back in. Right? Now the amount of transform we're applying here is almost the same as we did for the prior frame, the frame before. Let's go do one more time. 21, it's here, it needs to go over here. So let's go to filter, just like before, and shift. And you see the amount of shift we did on the prior. It hasn't applied it yet, but what you could do is go here and perhaps change that 71 to 70. So select the one, select this and put 0 on it, and boom, it moves it nearby. It's not the right amount for this frame though. We need to move it a little bit more, and when you do that, then you have a good location at 80 and minus 620. Okay, that. So that's how that works. Now I mentioned the shift is not the only way to do that. Let's see one more. Let's go to frame number 22. It's over here right now, and we want to move it over there to that place, right? So oops, I'm still painting with the custom animator brush. Let's not do that. Undo that. Okay, so here it is, and we want to move it over there. Now instead of shift, one thing you can also do is the transform. There's a transform right there in the transform menu. And that one though will show you a preview, and you can make it bigger. That's a nice feature too. And you can just drag it around. Now in the preview is where you drag it and you can see the result, but in that you cannot see the result compared to the original. Whereas over here on the main view you actually see it. So you can do a transform here too. And it can be very sensitive. It can move around a bit, but that's why you also have actually some additional controls here. You click on that and you can move it up one notch at a time. Very fine-tuned individual incremental adjustments. So you can bring it exactly to match and overlap with the ghost image of the prior. You can even add incremental rotation or scaling changes. So that's hey, that's my code. I did that. I just wanted to remind myself of that. 0.001% of the code is something I put in there. And I'm not the only one. There are a couple of developers that have created plugins or add-ons that you can add to Dog Waffle. Okay, so we have this one. Let's save and let's go to the next one. And so once again, we have that ability to go to filter, transform, and again move it. See, this one was very far away. Let's move it back here, and okay that. And if you do this, you know, again, you could do that manually like this, or you could use a timeline to actually keyframe a couple of key positions and leave the rest alone. That's another way to do it. So let's go, but let's just do this one more time or two more times to the last times. I like this transform. I like this. So let's go here. Where is it? There it is. Let's bring him to the right location. There you go, and keyframe that. And we probably have only two more. Oh, one more. Look at that. That's it. So this one there. This one needs to transform also. And let's make it so. Let's go to transform and make sure we see this thing line up with the ghost image of the prior location. Oh, sensitive. Okay, again, you have the fine controls here. Once you're close but not right spot on it, use that. Right, and you can click until it lines up perfectly, or close enough. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect, just close enough. And if it needs rotation, do that too. Add a little bit of rotational change. If it needs a change in size, change the scale. There you go. So that transform goes a little bit beyond what the shift does, because you can also scale and rotate it. But now let's disable the onion skin or the light table, and we can see that the airplane is in a little bit more stable environment here. It still jitters a tiny little bit. That is one we could probably do yet another pass with the motion prediction, or with the tracking. So let's disable the artist guides and zoom back down to reasonable dimension and see what that looks like. Okay, so let's play it. And just focus, don't focus on the stuff around it here, right? That's cut away, but focus on just the airplane. And look at how that one now flies without moving too much. All right, so the next thing I'll do is actually crop again. I'm going to go, first of all, I'll store this animation. That's always important to keep that little safe copy here, and then crop to the animation. We have a few parts where we added this black stuff because the transform doesn't tile it. The shift did. The shift keeps it tiling when we use the shift filter, but when we use the transform filter here, we didn't enable the tiling. Although there is a tile option, we just didn't use it. So we didn't repeat the white background to the other side. But there is the ability to do that. Let me just show that. If you go to filter, transform, there it is. You actually have an option here called tile, and when you click that, it will tile the other edge to the other side, right? So you have that capability too. Now that it already has the damaged dark area, it's a bit more difficult to get rid of that. But what we'll do is we'll simply get rid of it by cropping. We're going to crop to this area. In fact, we can do another one of those ovals, or maybe this time a rectangular selection with the rectangular marquee. And you can see maybe if we stay even with the sky always inside. Yeah, the sky background is always there. And we actually have with this the ability to pick this up as a custom animated brush that is very nicely contained now and focused on the airplane. All right, so one thing I'll do is perhaps make this selection a little bit bigger than that, like say about this big, and then crop to that. Right, so that's one way we can do it. We can do the selection with the marquee initially, and then do a crop to selection. When you do that, it's going to crop not just this one frame, but the entire image sequence again. Right? Or we can use the crop tool once again. So when we do the when you use the crop tool, initially it selects the current selection that we have already. The alpha mask is used as a reference for what to select, but you can certainly go out of that or into it even more so, and perhaps do more of a square region selection, something like this. And you can scrub through that to see if the part of the airplane is always still in here, and then right click inside the crop tool and select crop. And so now we have a crop error. It's still not perfect on the background here, but that's okay. We're not going to mind that so much, because what perhaps the goal of this entire exercise is to create a custom animated brush of this airplane and be able to use this to paint into another image or another video. Right? So what I'll do is I'll select the center area here with a with the magic with the ellipse to alpha, and do something like this. All right, and perhaps blur it like we've seen before. Selection, Gaussian blur. Do a little bit of blurry transition on the edge there. Not too much. We don't want to cut into the airplane. And so now, if we pick this up as a custom brush, we will have a nice little animation of the airplane with that. And so what we could do is, in fact, you know what, before we pick it up, we might want to make it loopable. Right now it's not. It's also not seamless, but most importantly it's not loopable. So let's do, because if we play it, you can see there's a little bit of a jump. Right there at the very end it jumps back. Right? If we play it at 30 or 50 frames a second in particular, you can see how fast it goes here, but it still kind of has a bit of a noisy movement and jumps back from the last frame to the first one. Right here, boom, jumps back to the first one. Right? So that kind of transition is something we also want to remove. And you can right click here and say make loopable, but what that's going to do is to essentially take the last few frames and overlay them over the first few frames. You don't want that, because it's going to start making it blurry. What you do want is perhaps have a little bit of a ping pong where it's going from here to that and then back before it goes back to that. So you can actually do that. You can say select this frame and then select this one, copy that entire thing, flip the one you already have, or reverse it, and then insert the copied one in front or at the end of it, and you now have two, one of them the original and the other one reversed. Alright, if you didn't follow that, let's do that again. Okay, so we go to the first frame and mark the in point here. Let's go to the last frame, let's mark the out point. The entire selection, the entire image sequence is now selected. And what we'll do is we'll copy that entire selection. So right click here and say copy this block. Okay, so what we just did by setting the in and the out marker, which you see here too, we created, we defined a block, and we now copy this block. So this block is now identified and copied, which means we can also do something else independently of the block. We can go and take this entire clip and reverse it, reverse the frame sequence. Right? And then we can go to the first one and insert in front of that the copied block that we still had, that we copied, right? So we can go insert block before the current frame. That one was not reversed. The one that was reversed was the one that was in here. But what we just inserted is not reversed. So in other words, we now have the one at the beginning that is not reversed, followed by the one that is reversed. And then at the very end, it meets back with the first frame. The last frame meets back with the first frame. And check it out. Now we have a sequence that keeps doing a ping pong. It goes from the front to the back and back to the front and keeps looping like that. And so that way we have actually a loopable animation that is a little bit longer than the original rather than being shorter. And we didn't lose any frames. We didn't get any sort of overlapping blending transitions or anything like that. And that's definitely a very valuable clip. Let's store that one too. And at that point, perhaps we may want to make this animation last even longer. So, or let's say we toss the custom brush and we say, no, that is our new custom brush. So let's go. You know what? One thing we could do is make it transparent on the blue sky. This part is darker. We could actually color key on that. Let's go do right click on this part. No, first we need to pick it up. Okay, so let's go pick this up as a custom brush and go to the first frame and say something like from here to here, and then remember what we need to do is use the alt key, press and hold the alt key and let go. And so now this entire sequence has been picked up as a custom brush. We can store it to see it here, but the background sky is all opaque. So what we do is we right click on it in order to go feather and key to it, right click, and you can get to key to exactly what color you want to make transparent. Not the airplane here, but the one on the outside here, the color on the outside. Now there's a little bit of tolerance you need to give it. So give it some, but not too much, or the airplane is going to disappear with it. So make sure you have the airplane still visible, and make sure you don't have the sky opaque. Somewhere middle ground in between here. All right, so that's a good way to do it. And now you can actually paint the airplane around here. Right, now we didn't store this yet, so that's why it actually still shows opaque. Let me do this. Let me select this as the transparent background. Let's store that. There you go. So now we have it. Oh yeah, and it still is kind of iffy. It's not enough transparency here, so we need to perhaps give it a bit more, tighten it a little bit down, and store that. All right, so here let's look at the film strip. And you can see that we do have some frames where it's still kind of iffy, and then the rest is pretty good. So that's one of the challenges, of course, with the color keying, that sometimes you do have some that are easier to key because the contrast is better. And in fact, we could work on that. We can work on the contrast before we pick it up as a custom brush. Let's do exactly that. Okay, so let's do the following. First of all, we might want to do one more pass of stabilization, but it will be easier if we actually have better contrast. So let's do that. Let's do apply a couple of transforms here. First of all, let's see what we get if we increase. First of all, no, before anything else, let's store this, right? Because we want to make sure we can get back to that really quickly. And the others, let's get rid of those. Let's go and close these. All right, so this one here is now our working set. These we can dismiss. Let's clean this up a little bit, and let's go and work on this. So this one here, let's go first, apply some better contrast. We have a thing called dynamic range, and you can go to the image menu and expand that dynamic range. That already is showing you the airplane much darker against a more saturated sky. And do we want that over the entire animation? You betcha, of course. Apply that over the entire sequence. So now you have an animation sequence where the airplane is easier to see, and probably not just to us human eyes, but also to the motion tracker. Another thing we could do, perhaps for some of the frames, add a little bit of sharpening. There are some frames that are very crisp, and there are some that are a little bit more blurry. It might be motion blur, it might be the automatic blurring, or the focus of the camera. There is a bit of noise here, and the motion tracker may lose it at some point. Like this one here might be a bit of a challenge. The others here are better. So sometimes what's worth doing before you throw the motion tracker on it is to actually sharpen this image. Right, so you could go to something like sharpen, digital photo enhance, and you could go and sharpen it and enhance that to see more detail. In fact, you can do that perhaps like this. It's great for this image, but you can apply that over the entire animation. Right? So now the entire sequence has a little bit more sharpening to it. It may not need it, and sometimes it actually makes it worse. Too much noise introduced, right? So be careful about that. But let's see if we have perhaps even better tracking now. Let's go and once again store this and then apply the stabilize function one more time. So let's go to filter, animated, stabilize, and let's see, dry run. Set the tracker again in this area was pretty good, like over here, and this time We don't need to move, it doesn't move much anymore, so we don't need to let it look too far away. The bigger area we search, the longer it takes, but we certainly need a large cover on the item we're looking. That's a better tracked option. And let's try with a smaller value on the fudge factor, and it's still a dry run, so let's go give that a try. This looks fairly promising here. So far so good. It's getting bigger. Are we gonna lose it, or are we gonna be able to stay on it? So far so good. And really, that's where it's at. You know, if the movement is very erratic and big movement, then it's difficult to track. But it's possible, and we saw that with a little bit of help, it gets better every time. Let's see if the MMX optimized one can also work with this now. Still not quite perfect. Still too much. So the MMX is more sensitive to noise. Let's see if we increase this. See if that works. But no, it's still so. MMX, I've not seen that work too well. It may work for videos that are not shaky too much, but I think we'll be better off here just using the non-accelerated mode. And let's see, there is a reconstruct, there is a repeat mode. Let's use that. Let's go one last time. Yeah, I think this will be fine. We can stabilize to that, and that will just add one additional level of stabilization, because right now it doesn't move too much anymore, but it's still a tiny little bit, and chances are we can improve it by 1 or 2 pixel offset every frame. So let's get rid of the dry run and rip it. Let it go through that, and we'll have an amazingly stabilized airplane. When you think about now where we started at the very beginning of this not so short tutorial, we had a very shaky video, and that now looks so much different. Look at how easy it is to recognize this airplane now. And so the next thing what we want to do is really pick this up as a custom brush, so we can actually paint this all over the place in other scenes. And so what I'll do is I'll perhaps go the following way about it. Let's go and do something like a selection. First pick it up as a custom brush, something like this. You know, we know it's stable now, so we can go like this and hold the Alt key down, and we know it's not going to move out of that selected area. It's very centered on that, very stable. So we can go to pick it up as a custom brush like we just did, and store this as a custom brush like that. The background color is still the same. The secondary color is the same as the sky, so it already made that transparent for us. But if you were not sure that that's really the way to do it, if you look at the film strip, well, it's actually pretty good. But if it still had some noise or some parts showing a bit more too opaque for the sky, you could still further enhance that. On a single frame, in fact, you can go, if you show the alpha on, well, actually it's not in the plane, it's only in the brush, but you can actually key that some more. If you look under the brush, there are some transparency controls here to do some more color keying, or key to secondary, key to luminance. There's some other, or the transparency tool for the brush. So there's a lot of additional information that you can work on to further improve the transparency or opacity of the image that you see inside your brush, the animated brush. I'm going to go and let's see, I'm going to go with the right. So this is the current brush right now. Let's do a preview. Yep, there it is. And you see we may want to increase the opacity. It's not at full opacity. Wait, oh, it is at full opacity. So we do have perhaps the need to do a couple of things. As we paint with that, we may want to make, where am I? Here's a step distance. Okay, so here we cycle very quickly through each frame of the animation in that animated brush. Because we have the step distance at 0, and that means we only need to move 1 unit to make it go to the next frame. It's very sensitive and it goes really fast. As we do that, one thing you notice is that it still has a little bit of an edge on the side. So we may want to tighten that, that blurry a little bit. Let's go do the following. I'm going to right click on the custom brush tool, and just pick the color. Again, not the inside of the airplane, although that's an interesting scenario sometimes. I'm going to grab the outside, and then I'm going to tighten it a little bit more. So I want to keep it opaque, but I also want to make the transition sudden rather than soft. So that way you have a little bit less of that border coloring showing. And with that, we're getting probably close to as good as it's going to be, at least at that level. But the next thing you can do, so again, store this and see if we can do some more. Let's get rid of this one. This here, you can still do some more things. You can change the size of it. You can double it quite easily, so it's double size. But you can also change the contrast or the hue saturation value, so you can give it a slightly different tint, more of a reddish, or you can let's reset this or restore it. You can go and no, where is it? There was no there reset. Okay, you can also change the brightness, hue, the saturation. Make it maybe just black and white. Get rid of that. Let's see what else. We have the saturation value, so this is the darkness. If maybe you're really interested in just a silhouette, you don't need to have it show anything but its color here or its opacity. So that's another trick you can use here to adjust if you see any more detail on the airplane or not. If it's going to be really just a silhouette that you need perhaps for a video game or for an animation of some sort, you really don't probably need to see more than just a silhouette like that. So let's actually with that now finish this and see where we're going with that. Why did we do all this? Why bother having it as an animated brush like that? Well, the thing is, you might have an animation. Let's start something new now. Let's create an animation, maybe a 640 by 360, something like this, and we do paint a sky on that. We'll do a sky, let's say filter. We could do that in a couple of ways. We could render the sky like this one, but we don't want it to look towards us. We want to be looking at the sky, up above our sky. So maybe we need to change the heading, no, the pitch. Not that either. Oh, probably that exactly, actually, come to think of it. That's probably, yeah, that's the one we need to change. So we're looking up at the sky. Change the scale of these clouds. Perhaps change, let's see, iterations, make it fluffy, make it crisp. Change the phase. The zoom factor. Let's see, we could change the cloud threshold to have less or more of that cloud coverage. We could do some cloud fall off. So a couple of interesting parameters to play with here. Even the coloring of the clouds with the gradients. And what I want to do is really just have this thing kind of animated, so it gradually drifts sideways. So let's go and animate that. And I don't know which way to animate it, but let's just try a little bit of both here, 1 and 2, and also change the shape and go. Oh, there is no animation yet. My bad. Let's go cancel and actually turn this into an animation. Oh yeah, because I created a new image. So let's make an animation of 222 frames. And that is intentionally a different number of frames than what we have in the animator brush. Remember, this one had about 60 or so frames last we left it, but this one here is going to be a 200 frame sequence with the rendered sky. Let's go back to that sky, and let's see if we still remember the parameters close enough. There's a little bit of noise on the side here, but that's okay. We'll probably blur that away. Let's go render that. 1, 2, 3 still remembers that. There you go. So now we have the sky moving and drifting a little bit, and that'll be an interesting sky to use against which we want to have a whole army of airplanes fly. So we have a scene basically where we look up at the sky, and maybe we'll even place the sun, a bright sun somewhere, or maybe we're on a planet with 2 suns and we'll have 2 bright suns. And we have some light diffusion, we have some mystic God rays, all sorts of things that we can apply to that, but we want to also have some airplanes fly across it here. So first of all, let's have a look at this animation. That looks interesting. The clouds move, very suspiciously interesting. That's all good. They moved, they changed shape. Maybe we need to blur that a little bit with some additional, let's go to the ghosting animation right there at the bottom. There is the ghosting, and apply that. So they do a little bit of blurring amongst themselves, right? One frame to the next kind of blurs. Then we also could do some light diffusion. That's under the photographic category. There it is, light diffusion. Or perhaps the blur with the mystic vision. I like that because especially if we add or the dark vision to make it look like we have some shadows cast from the dark clouds. As maybe we'll place a sun behind it here, a bright sun, and so the shadows need to cast the clouds need to cast the shadows. Let's do that. And then of course this begs for us to also place a sun there. So let's go to the snow there, the lens flares, and find ourselves a nice bright sunspot. Let's get the flare settings to choose our sun. Maybe it's one of those blue suns. I don't know. Let's try this one and place it right there. It's too blue. Let's try red. That'll be a little bit better. Maybe not that intense. And maybe just something totally different. How about this one? Yeah, let's try that. And place it roughly where that hotspot was for from where we cast the shadows with the mystic vision, and just render that. Now you could be more sophisticated even and actually change the intensity or the size, the level of this brightness here based on whether there is a cloud in front of it or not. Right? If the cloud is in front, then you shouldn't see the sun, or maybe only part of it, right? And if it's a clear spot in between the clouds, it should go really bright. So that's another level of realism that you can add to that quite easily. In fact, let's do that. Undo this quickly and put the sun right there. Along the animation, we'll see though if a cloud comes nearby and covers it. Right, so if, for instance, right now here, this should be full brightness. Let's make it bright like this, right? And then we have this cloud come in front of it. Let's bring it down a little bit lesser, and there you go. And then we have the sun come back into a clear spot where it can be very bright again. And so we see some changes in brightness based on what's moving in front of it. Later we'll probably also have an airplane fly in front of it, and we'll adjust maybe the rendering at that point. Maybe we should actually wait for the rendering of the sun to the very last moment after we've composited the the airplanes. But hey, why not just use this as a starting point to experiment with? So we do have this one here. Let's go store it. Store animation to disk. And we now have this nice little animation. Let's make sure it plays at the target speed of 30 frames per second. And there we go. And so now we have this animation in which we want sort of a couple of airplanes fly across it really quickly. And remember, in our original animation, the airplane that we see here, with the preview, we can see it here, it was flying this way. But in our movie, we really want to have it in a different orientation. Well, no problem. We can just use this here to change the size. We can use this here to change the rotation and say, okay, you want it to go from left to right or back the other way. No problem. We can have it fly like that. All right. So now we have to have it actually fly across that. We can paint it like this. Not so good. That's in the current frame. Let's undo that. But what you could do is you can paint it with the Alt key down, right? And when you do that, you'll actually have it cycle through the entire sequence. Let me do that outside of the frames first, okay? I'm going to move this around here, and what I'll do is I'll press and hold the Alt key down, and then I'll paint, but I'll paint outside of my canvas. I'll paint on the outside right here. So press and hold, and now what you see is it's actually cycling through the animation as I am painting, and it's also cycling through the frames of my airplane, but I don't see that because it's outside of the canvas. However, if I go in, I will see that. So here's what I'll do. I'll go to the airplane. I'll make the step distance relatively small initially, so that will be an airplane that's far away and moves slowly. I want that to be smaller, so let's go and reduce the size to about this one. So you'll see it here, and it's going to go like this. Now, if you do this manually, it's going to be a bit ugly, but that's why we call it art, right? Not design, it's art. So we'll go with the Alt key down, and you can go and press go, make a straight line down to the right. And here's your airplane. It's now rendering. Oh, there's a whole bunch of them now. Look at that. And you can see another one here, another pass there, and another pass here. So you can have a whole army of airplanes coming in now. Now we have some that move faster because they're closer. So we're going to make them bigger, like this. And we're going to increase the step distance so they appear to be moving faster. They don't need to have 1 pixel movements on the mouse. We can have them go much faster. And there it is. There's one. There's another one. And there's yet another one. And so you can have a lot of airplanes fly, some of them at high altitude very slowly, and others really fast. And then we'll do some really big ones. Those are the noisy ones we can hear, like this. And they all fly the same direction, God knows why. What we'll do is we'll go to this part here and make the step distance like this. And sometimes you need to adjust that to just get a little bit more leeway around it here, make it comfortable, and just make a really fast one here. This is scary now, a real invasion of airplanes. Well, it's good. It's not scary for us. These are our planes. These are our boys. So nothing to worry here. If it's the snaily poos we're fighting, you know who I'm talking about. If it's the grunts, if it's the if it's on Planet Reach, we're proud of that one. We're gonna fight this one. I think I've been making this video for way too long now. I need to go play some Halo now. So let me just let me just finish this with a little bit of light diffusion again. Let's add some color. Where is it? Photographic effects here. Photographic light diffusion. And because the bright pixels, when you have something like this here, the bright pixels are going to bleed into the scene. So you want to have some light diffusion to make it look a little bit more realistic. And there you go, it's applying that. Now we can make it even more realistic by also again adding that shadow cast that we already did on the clouds, but we could also do that for the airplanes. All right, so let's go back to the dark vision and apply, center it where the sun is, and then add some light diffusion, some dark diffusion to that. And as you scrub it, you can see that the airplanes are casting their shadows. Right now, this may be a little bit too intense, too much of a shadow. So you may want to reduce the factor and just have very little bit of it, or you may want to not do that, or maybe use an alpha channel to blend how much of it you get from that filter. That's another way to do it. So reduce, put an alpha mask on it that just is all over the place, the same amount, intensity at maybe 10%. So the filter is going to apply only by a very small amount. And then there's also, of course, compositing with 2 levels of videos, one with the clouds and the airplanes, another one with just the shadows, and you want to composite them, but not to full percentage. So you can go and combine the two here, composite with swap, or combine with swap right there, and do a mix. But that's for a different tutorial. Let's see what else could we do to make this perfect in the very end. You know, there's oh, perhaps we are watching this through some goggles, or I don't know, some transforms. We could do some more photographic. Well, the fog filter, no, we don't need fog. Well, we could, but we're looking up at the sky, so it should be the same fog all over. Still, that's a possibility. Let's apply that. Why not? The more we throw at it, the more we realize there's really a lot of things. The sky. Oh, here's a nice one too. A little bit of a sunny sunset condition there. Let's apply that. Let's see what else we have. Day for light. If you want to make it look like it's evening, or it's like poor visibility, that one's an interesting one. Day for light will reduce the contrast and make it a bit more of a night vision scenario. So that's an interesting one. Like if you want to make it look like this is a nighttime invasion, or this is not the sun, it's the moon back there, right? So you apply that day for night, you switch the day for the night, and you're gonna get an interesting transition. Oh, fisheye also. If you want to look like you have some very blurry vision, very poor vision here, and you want to make it look like you therefore get a quick shot, a quick look at it, but when it's on the side, it's kind of blurry to the side. It distorts it. No, let's undo that. But this one is nice. We can certainly use this as our final, and I think I'm done now. This was what, an hour-long tutorial. Can't believe you're still here. What are you doing? Don't you have a life? Come on. uh, well, thanks for watching anyway, and have fun waffling and howling.